Agari Prabhu, or anybody who knows the number, the passcode to enter the Zoom manually? Okay.
Did you get it, Prabhu?
No. Can you give it to me? Oh,
Zero,
okay.
6.
I see it. I see it. 1 second. Okay, I'm gonna forward it to her. Okay. Glad to see that you were able to log in. Hare Krishna, please. I sent your biography to everyone, so they are aware of who you are, what you do, and what your shtick is. So thank you for agreeing to speak to us in Gita Nagari. There will be other devotees joining momentarily, but there is no need to make anyone, particularly yourself, wait. So please take it away. This is Jagannathesvari, Devi Dasi. She is Prabhupada disciple from England and has been doing good service for a very, very long time. So let's hear from her and see if we get inspired and start doing something worthwhile ourselves. Please take it away.
Thank you, Prabhu. Thank you very much for inviting me. I'm very happy to be here with all of you. So today, the title of my topic is The Heart of Prabhupada's Mission. I mean, should I just, do you want to interview me or should I just talk? How do you want to do this?
Maybe you should start, and if I think of pertinent questions, I may interrupt you or ask you something. So go ahead. It's up to you if you want.
Yeah, okay, that's fine. That's fine. Okay. This title, I don't know, it just came to me. For some reason, it just popped into my head, the title, it just popped up. So I went with it, and I was just chanting my Gayatri, actually. And for some reason, this title just popped up in my head. I wasn't even thinking about it, but it just came there. So I just went with it. And although it was along the lines of the sort of thing that I wanted to talk about, that I was desiring to talk about. So yeah, I will start with the, there are two reasons, as probably most of you know, two reasons for the advent of Lord Chaitanya. The internal purpose of his appearance and the external purpose. The internal purpose was that Krishna desired to feel, to experience the love that Radharani feels for him. And the external purpose was to inaugurate the Sankirtan movement and to spread the Hare Krishna mantra, to spread Krishna consciousness. So these two are connected together in the heart of Lord Chaitanya. So one is love, and the other one is compassion. Krishna's desire to feel Radharani's love, and Radharani's compassion, which manifested in the mercy of Lord Chaitanya to actually deliver souls by spreading the Sankirtan mission, by spreading the chanting of the names of Krishna, and by spreading Krishna consciousness. So that love that Lord Chaitanya experiences is the love of Radharani, because he's in the mood of Radharani. And that becomes manifested, especially in his later pastimes and Antya-lila. And his compassion is from the compassion of Radharani, it originates from the compassion of Krishna, the compassion that Krishna feels for his fallen children. And then it becomes even more soft and sweet when it's manifested in the heart of Radha. So that love and compassion it's coming down. It's coming down from Krishna to Radharani, to Lord Chaitanya, and then to the associates of Lord Chaitanya, to the whole Guru Parampara, and all the way to Prabhupada. That love and compassion, which is the heart of Prabhupada's mission. And as it comes down, it's like it becomes more sweet and more intense. It's like boiling milk and making burfi. So this is the heart of Prabhupada's mission. It was out of love and compassion that Prabhupada traveled to the West at a ripe age, advanced age, and miraculously established the Sankirtan movement in the Western world. So for us to repay our debt to Prabhupada is to pay forward what he's given to us by serving his mission, or the Sankirtan movement of Lord Chaitanya. And as we all know, the best way to please Prabhupada is to spread Krishna consciousness to others. Actually, Prabhupada wanted all of us to become gurus. He actually said that I want all my disciples to become gurus. And that included both male and female. And that should be for not only for Prabhupada disciples, but for his grand disciples, for all his followers, that he wants all of them to become gurus. That doesn't mean that we all have to, sit on a big seat and give initiations. But the word guru means teacher. It means that our family business, our duty as disciples, followers of Prabhupada, is to teach others about Krishna, is to pass on what Prabhupada has given to us. So, because the heart of Prabhupada's mission is love and compassion, that's actually what we need. That's actually what drives devotees to spread Krishna consciousness to others, to share that knowledge with others, if you like. But then there's also something else that we need to become successful as teachers, because Prabhupada wanted to create brahmanas, which means teachers, And that means he wanted us to develop intelligence. So he wanted us to become independently thoughtful and to rack our brains to find different ways and means of spreading Krishna consciousness. So this is like the head of Prabhupada's mission, you could say. So in other words, you know, there's this saying, follow your heart. So I believe in follow your heart, but what I like even better is follow your heart, but don't leave your brain behind. And that's what we need to do in order to become preachers in Prabhupada's line. We have to have that compassion, but at the same time, we have to be able to use some intelligence to come up with ways and means of spreading Krishna consciousness. So it's the compassion that drives us to reach out to others, and then that guides the intelligence to come up with the ideas and the plans. So now looking at ISKCON today, there's a problem that's in the West that not really a problem, but in the sense that Krishna consciousness is not spreading so well as it did before, in the sense that we're not really, the levels of recruitment have gone down among Western people. So it's working very well amongst the Indian diaspora, but for the native people of the West, of America and Europe, it's kind of died down a bit. It's not really developing fast enough as it did before and as Prabhupada wanted it to be. So so what can we do about this? Because sometimes devotees may say, or we may fall into this idea of thinking that, oh, well, these people are just too degraded. They're just too sinful. There's nothing we can do for them. We just carry on, you know, what we're doing, and that's it. And if they don't respond, then that's their problem. But actually, the thing is that we need to learn how to adapt, how to advance, how to modernize, how to innovate, because we're no longer living in the 1960s, the 1970s. This is the 21st century. The world is changing. And so we also need to change. We also need to adapt. Like Prabhupada, he made so many adjustments when he launched the Hare Krishna movement in the West. He made so many adjustments according to the time, place, and circumstance. He adapted, he changed. So in order to attract people, if he hadn't done that, then ISKCON would never have happened. So just as Prabhupada made adjustments, and just as all the previous acharyas also, they made adjustments, adjusting the details while keeping the principles. This is the way Krishna consciousness has been spread throughout the history of Gaudiya Vaishnavism. That can be found in the teachings of the Goswamis, where they adapted the teachings to suit the current society, and with Bhaktivinoda Thakur, especially in Bhaktisiddhanta, how many adjustments they made to to adapt to the current circumstances, and especially we see that in Prabhupada. So we may feel that, you know, we're not qualified to do that. But the problem is, if we don't do that, if we just keep everything the same, just do the same things and present ourselves in the same way as we have done since Prabhupada started ISKCON, then we're going to get left behind in the world, and we're not going to be as successful as we should be, because you know, we have the absolute truth. We have been given access to the highest truths of bhakti, of Radha and Krishna, of Lord Chaitanya. And to not be able to pass this on, then this would be a great tragedy, and it would be a big problem. Now, of course, there are a lot of initiatives going on. We must give credit where credit's due. There are devotees who are carrying out wonderful initiatives. The reason I'm talking about this is just to share and just to discuss, you know, ideas of what we can do more, because there's always more we can do to help push Prabhupada's mission forward. So that's why I'm speaking about this. Because if we think that we just want to keep things the same way, then we're going to find that not so many people are going to come forward. And that's actually what's happening. That, of course, these main activities that Prabhupada established of book distribution, Harinam, and Prasad distribution, they should go on. They should never be stopped. But adjustments can be made in details if we find that we're not getting the response that we would like, that not so many people are taking interest, not so many people are coming forward from the non-Hindu community, then this means that we need to scratch our heads and figure out ways that we can adjust, ways that we can attract people. And like one thing that could be happening, that one thing that we could do in ISKCON is to do some market research. Every successful company and every successful movement, they do market research. And that would be a great way to get feedback from the public, to pass out questionnaires and ask people for their feedback. That we need to take an interest in what people are saying, and so that we can actually take that on board and actually listen to what people are saying, rather than just trying to tell people about our mission, but actually get some feedback. And because while it's true that people receive spiritual benefits from taking prasadam, hearing the Harinam, and buying books, the amount of advancement they make will vary according to their state of consciousness and their level of understanding. These things we need to understand. Like, for example, if someone takes prasadam without understanding that it's prasadam, they just think it's ordinary food, then the advancement they make will be limited according to their understanding, according to their consciousness. Because spiritual advancement it's a conscious process. The Agyata Supriti road, Agyata Agyata Sukriti has a limited result, whereas when people actually read the books, when people actually try to understand what the holy names are, understand what prasadam is, that's when they really start to advance in Krishna consciousness. And Krishna is in anxiety, actually, about his children who are rotting in the material world. We know that Lord Chaitanya is in anxiety. And so that's why Krishna sends his pure devotees down to try to bring souls back to him. Prabhupada was in anxiety, and this anxiety is our inheritance. It's a symptom of a Vaishnava to be always worried about the conditioned souls and try to think of ways to deliver them. So what can we do? How to adapt? We have to really learn how to adjust details without compromising the principles, retain the principles, the main principles, which are the teachings from the Shastra, the holy name, and the institution of ISKCON, and the 4 regulative principles. All these things need to be maintained, but the external details can be adjusted to attract people from different cultures. Because if we're going to give this Indian cultural picture to everyone, then a lot of people will not relate to that and they will back off. And as we all know, that this is a thing that when temples become, when they appear to outsiders to be Hindu temples, then we don't get so many Western people coming in. And this is something that, of course, devotees are dealing with. But we need to present Krishna consciousness as a spiritual science, as a non-sectarian, non-religious, spiritual science that is for everyone. Because by transcending this Indian cultural image, we will reach a more diverse population. So that there needs to be education about this in ISKCON, that for doing Western outreach, there needs to be understanding of how to approach people, how to deal with people, and how to present Krishna consciousness according to the times that we live in now and in the language of modern people. And also a thing that we need to do, I feel, in my opinion, is to learn to blend in more. Now, again, this is externally. Of course, internally, we don't compromise our principles. We don't compromise our philosophy. But externals are just externals. And if we can try to appear more like regular people, then a lot of regular people will feel more comfortable to relate to us. Because if we present ourselves as different, or we're different from you, we wear different clothes, we follow different principles, or that we're somehow or other, we're better than you. If we give that kind of impression, then people, they tend to feel alienated from that. And it can create barriers. We may be unconsciously creating barriers, although our intention, I know that all devotees' intention is to bring people to Krishna consciousness, but we have to be very careful not to create barriers, to actually emphasize the similarities that we have with other people rather than the differences. Because at heart and soul, we're all the same, we're all spirit souls. And they are also all Krishna's devotees. They just haven't understood that yet. So Prabhupada was not concerned about dress. He was not concerned about spreading Hindu culture or Hinduism. He always very much stressed that we should present this Krishna consciousness as a spiritual science and not as a religion. So we take our guidance from Prabhupada. Those things that he told us then are still relevant, always relevant. And it was Prabhupada who told us how to go about this, that we need to use our intelligence, not just following whatever is being done, but to think, but to be independently thoughtful and figure out ways and means how to bring more Western people to Krishna consciousness.
Can I come in now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, I took a bunch of notes from what you just spoken. First of all, I would say that you are preaching to the choir, at least in my case. There's not a single item I heard that I haven't been speaking about myself, except for perhaps the marketing that we should try to figure out what people are thinking. And on that note, I will say that the market research, does anyone still know that we are still around? We have actually worked ourselves into relevance for so many years. So every year I give a class on global religions at the University of California, Santa Barbara, online nowadays. And the professor introduces me and who I represent by saying they used to be prominent, they used to be visible, they used to be everywhere, and now you have to figure out, but they're still around. I mean, it's like apologizing for us that we are still around, whereas in earlier years, like for example in 1970s, there was an impromptu survey carried on by the devotees in Detroit that asked, for a couple of days, I think they asked people, how many Hare Krishnas do you think there are in town? And the smallest number that they got a reply was 1,000. And there were 10 devotees in Detroit, but they were everywhere. They just had Harinam parties, they will change, they will go a couple blocks in one direction, then the other direction. But nowadays, we have become nearly invisible. So you spoke about Harinam, and Harinam is to me, looks a bit like a carnival. And that is a very exotic thing. And as you mentioned, people are not into exotic India anymore. The mystical aspect of India was so attractive in the 60s and 70s. It's no longer a concern to practically anyone. So how do you carry on all these activities in order for us to become prevalent, prominent, visible, again, without alienating people or just vibrating the sympathetic strings of just the Indian diaspora, which is what we end up doing. So here's my first concern. How do you do it without falling into the same trappings that we have been doing for a long time?
Yeah, well, I think that Harinam could be done in a different way. Like you said, it looks like exotic India and people are not really, I mean, people might enjoy watching it. They may find it entertaining, but they wouldn't really relate to it. They wouldn't really think of themselves as becoming a part of that. So like Harinam could take many different forms. Devotees could wear Western dress. There are some, actually. There are some who are doing that now in a few places, I think. But on the whole, it's still very much the dhotis and saris, Harinam, as it always has been. It hasn't changed. So that's one thing that could change, is the dress. Another thing is it could be done in a less invasive way, because I think some people, they feel uncomfortable. They feel that it's a bit invasive, especially if devotees kind of take over the whole sidewalk and they're so enthusiastic that the people are sort of feeling that they're being pushed aside. And that doesn't really give people a good impression. It doesn't give them a good feeling. That they don't want to be forced. They want to feel that they're free to like this or not like it, or to listen to it or not listen to it. We don't want to infringe on their civil freedoms. So I think we need to be really sensitive to do Harinam in places that don't infringe on people. Like, for example, sitting down in a public park or a grassy place and singing more gently and softly, rather than sort of yelling and shouting, as some very enthusiastic devotees tend to do. People, I think, would appreciate it more if it's a bit more low key, and then they have a choice whether they want to come to it. And it could actually attract more people to come forward and ask questions, and it could attract more interest in that way, I think.
Well, and I've seen, and I participated in Harinams where even doesn't matter if we take over the downtown and push everybody to the side. People take pictures, but they don't want to join. I think the main problem is not if we occupy the pedestrian zone, but that they can't relate. They can't see themselves doing what we do. So how do you fix that? Yeah, you said more melodic, which I am totally in favor of. Not exotic dresses that we appear as peacocks in mating season, but that doesn't really bring the throngs that we expect. Seems like at this point, food scarcity and wars are the only things that are going to increase our recruitment techniques. And also, you spoke about Brahmins. Prabhupada came to create Brahmins because there were no heads, and but right now we are in Gita Nagari. We are not in New York City. We need farmers. We don't care about Brahmins. We have enough Brahmins. Our pyramid is an inverted pyramid where most of the Sudras, Vaishyas, and Kshatriyas should be. We as the base of a society is all Brahmins. It's all people doing achaman and reciting scripture, but they can't run a plow, they can't drive a tractor, they can't train oxen, they can't grow food. And if you literally right now, there is the food supply stops. Most devotees are going to starve because they have no idea how to grow a potato, a tomato, a sweet potato, or anything like that. They may know all the mantras to take care of tulsi, but they don't know how to grow spinach. So we need more farmers. How do you recruit farmers? I think Brahmins we have enough, and they will actually be fine. People are still going to be studious, and they're going to quote Shastra, and they're going to be clean and truthful and honest and compassionate. But how do you attract farmers? That's what we need now.
Yeah, well, I think we need both. And yeah, I agree with you that we don't necessarily need more pujaris or yagik brahmanas, but I was thinking more in terms of preachers, Brahmins as preachers, and we always need more of those preachers and teachers, because Brahmins, they're supposed to be, you know, the kind of highest class of Brahmins. I think they're supposed to be preachers and teachers, and that's what Prabhupada wanted us to be the most. That's his mission, to spread Krishna consciousness. And if we spread Krishna consciousness, if successfully, and attract more people, then all kinds of people should come, including the farmers and the growers, because I think people are becoming more interested in growing their own food these days generally around the world because of you know, climate change and environmental issues. So it's not so hard to grow food. It's something that anyone can learn, I think. But, you know, as you say, there is a shortage at the moment.
Another point that I had, he said, adopt, modernize, innovate. This is fine and dandy, but we end up diluting in the name of innovate and modernize and adapt. I had personal experiences of this as I spoke at a avant-garde, the forefront of preaching in one of the American towns to students and newcomers. And the devotees were extremely nice and actually successful. They were actually making devotees. But they told me not to use the words God or religion when I spoke. So, being who I am, I couldn't resist. And I said that I was never, I said, because of certain people, especially newcomers, sensibilities, and this is, I said it out loud. I was asked not to say the words God and religion during my talk. So because I'm not used to this kind of constraint, I will actually switch. Instead of God, I'm going to say Bob. And instead of religion, I'm going to say sports. So people who are ordinarily hurt by this type of apparent singularities, they are not anymore. So I gave a whole speech, including every time I needed to say religion, I said sports. Every time I needed to say God or Krishna, I said Bob, and it went fine. So I think we have to find a way to not dilute the message. So what do you suggest that we do? What are your personal implementation when you talk to people, and I assume you do, that are not aware of Krishna consciousness, and you see a possible interest, or you try to fan it? How do you adapt and innovate and modernize and without diluting, and that people end up saying, oh, that's wonderful, what is it? And so at that point, what do you say? How do you bring Krishna consciousness into the picture without sounding biased or prejudice or religious or whatever?
Well, I think this is actually a worrying trend I find in ISKCON at the moment, that there's a trend now to, as you said, to not speak about God, to not mention God. There's a trend to to just try to help people to come to Sattva-gun, the mode of goodness, and then with the hope that one day eventually they'll become devotees. But like there's no plan for that, as I can see. They don't talk about God, and they don't even talk about the soul. I've seen in many cases of senior devotees who are preaching to quite large audiences. And yeah, I do find this a very worrying trend. And I think that the problem is that we're worried that because people don't want to hear about God, as you said, they don't want to hear about religion, so we don't talk about those things. In my opinion, the solution is not that we don't talk about these things, but we learn how to talk about these things in a way that people can understand, in a way that people can digest. Because the problem is not really with God or religion. The problem is that the way these things have been portrayed to them from the established major religions, from the bad history of religions, from all the bad things that have happened in the name of religion. So that's why God's been given, bad publicity, and people don't want to know about him anymore. So, and also because of the division that has taken place between science and religion. So people, they want to follow the science now. They feel that there's no kind of harmony between science and religion anymore. That's all been lost. So in our preaching, we need to learn how to bridge that gap, how to present Krishna consciousness. That's why Prabhupada said it's a spiritual science. Now, how do you combine these two together, spirituality and science? They sound like really conflicting things. But so that's the challenge for us, to learn how to present a spiritual science, to learn how to present Krishna consciousness in a scientific way, starting with, the difference between the soul and the body. It's very simple for people to understand if you explain in the right way that, they're not the body. There are very simple ways that Prabhupada taught us how to explain that to people, and that's the starting point. And then, gradually you go forward, like, because everyone, even though they may call themselves atheist or agnostic, they say they're non-believers, they have no faith, they have no religion, but everyone, is like inside themselves, they're thinking, well, I wonder if God exists. And they must sometimes think that. And they must sometimes think, well, where are we coming from? What is all this? Why am I here? Who am I? Of course, a lot of people, they try not to think about these things. They push it out, but it's there. Still, it's there in the back of their head, nagging them. And so that's where we have to penetrate there. And into the realm, the deeper realms of the mind, and try to help people to understand, not just like preaching or trying to convert them, but trying to make them understand by philosophy, by logic, by science, by reason, that there has to be a God. Otherwise, where did everything come from? Where did we come from? Where does love come from? Where did they get this idea of equality? They all believe in equality, right? But there's no such thing as equality physically. That is a metaphysical concept. So anyone who believes in equality, logically, they should believe that that we live in a bi-dimensional universe, that there is a metaphysical realm. So in that sense, just by simple logic and reason, you can move them up if they are honest and they're ready to listen.
I would like to on that particular topic. First of all, unfortunately, I don't know why Agari Prabhu has put spotlight on me, and we cannot see anybody else. I hope I'm not a narcissist. This is not my choice. And in this, on this topic, sometimes, because you started by saying, okay, now I think we're going to be able to see everybody. There you go. So in the enthusiasm that we carry, especially when we are a bit new to the process, we sometimes confuse compassion and like we have to give Krishna consciousness to everybody, but we end up giving ourselves in a very rudimentary way to others. In other words, it's not compassion, it's false ego, is actually the desire to be recognized because you're a great preacher, or the unlimited desire to hear one's own voice, which is the sweetest sound. So you talk to others about Krishna, but you're basically delighted to be the one who does it, and you tell people about Krishna consciousness because you're following it, so you want to share it from that perspective, not because it's good for them, but because it's good for you, etc., etc. So how do you avoid all these trappings that when you, well, don't use the word preaching anymore, teaching, maybe teach people about Krishna consciousness, that they don't become, I mean, God forbid they will actually figure out that is our false ego that wants to be glorified, and not that we actually have a compassionate heart, that they will want to share the best thing that we have.
Yeah, well, that's why we need to develop that compassion. And because the whole point of speaking to someone about Krishna consciousness is to help that person. So that's that mood of, and they will pick up. I mean, if there is some ego involved in it, they're going to pick up, and it's not going to really be so effective. So that's why, like I was just talking about convincing people philosophically, but at the same time as presenting the philosophy, the science, the logic for them to understand, there also has to be this mood, as I was talking about in the beginning, this mood of compassion, so that people will feel, they'll feel that kindness. And I think that, I mean, from my own experience of becoming a devotee, and I'm sure many, many devotees experienced that, I became convinced from someone who was very kind to me. One devotee was very kind to me, but at the same time, spoke to me in an intelligent way. And that's how I became convinced to take up Krishna consciousness. So that's why it starts from there. As I'd said in the beginning, that the kindness, the love, and the compassion is the main ingredient. And then that should be backed up with the philosophy, the knowledge, so that people can also be convinced philosophically, especially people who are, educated people, and they want to understand things rationally rather than just emotionally. I mean, some people, if they are already quite religious anyway, they may, and they're not so philosophically inclined, they may be happy to just, they may get attracted just by, the kirtan and by the kindness of devotees, and that will be enough for them. So that is the first thing. But I think that the philosophy and the knowledge and the science are very, very important if we want to actually reach a broad society, of intelligent people, because also we need to be recruiting the future leaders of ISKCON, and those people ought to be the educated, intelligent people who can help to guide the movement forward.
On this particular topic, I wanna address it, but I think Rajalila has a question, so I will hold back and ask you after she asks her question. Please unmute yourself.
Yeah, Hare Krishna, Janai Shri Prabhu. I'm gonna make this really brief. Firstly, I just want to thank you so very much for having the courage to have a voice about this topic, because it is a needed topic that to continue talking about. And I also want to appreciate you for the time that you put into, especially the book for Grihastas. It's such a wonderfully packaged book. And so thank you very much for your time in doing that. Yeah, so in terms of what the conversation that we're having now, I always question these things coming back around and around, because as you may know, this kind of innovative preaching or teaching has been going on, and it is still going on. There are people that are doing it. And so what I want to appreciate is you bringing, to the awareness of people about the need to balance both, because the traditional way of presenting Krishna consciousness, as well as the innovative way, both have value as we've seen. And so without wanting to just, glorify other people, I'm going to take a little stand and do that anyway. As you know, Bhakti Tirtha Maharaj, he did this over at least 30, 40 years, almost 40 years ago. He did this innovative preaching, innovative teaching. And so is His Holiness Devamrita Maharaj. He's been doing this for years. And there are many others that are doing it. What I want to thank you for is to keep this conversation going. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So, Sarvatma, did you want to say something else?
I'm so sorry, I was muted. Looks like I was talking to myself. I was trying to say, actually in the past, you couldn't tell who was crazy. You could tell who was crazy because they were talking to themselves. Now everybody has a Bluetooth, and a cell phone. So you can't tell the crazy people from the not crazy people. You don't know who's using a phone and who's talking to themselves. So in the educating the new generations leaders, I think this is one of the greatest failures that we have to account for, that we are not educating the new generation as leaders. We are just basically the old guard is dying, and there is not the new guard to take over. And we wish it wasn't like that, but I think it is positively one of our greatest flops. If you have a comment about that, I would like to hear it. Otherwise, I go to the next topic. So let me know.
Yes, I hear you. I think there is a shortage. That's why we really need to think about that very carefully. It's a very, very important point.
Yeah, we have to empower people, and we haven't done that. We haven't done that. There is one interesting conversation I heard between two sannyasis, actually, and they were discussing preaching, actually. Let me use this word without its pejorative connotation. And one of the sannyasis told the other one that it is strategy, the most important thing. And the other one was saying that it's purity, the most important thing. And the other one said, no, it's not purity. And the other sannyasa said, how can you even say that? How can you even conceive of that? He said, I'll give you an example. You actually preach in two different zones. One is somewhere in Eastern Europe, and another one is in the Western world. And you are extremely successful in Eastern Europe, and you are completely failing in the Western world. So how can we talk about purity? It's the same person. It's the same person preaching in both places, and one is successful and one is unsuccessful. How can you say it's not strategy? So this is my next question. Of course, purity has to be there. It's not like but I have a personal example about this. I was told about Krishna consciousness by someone who left the movement and wasn't chanting or following the principles. And I joined. And a week before this person talked to me, talked to someone else, and the other person joined as well. So I'm not sure about the purity part. I think the heart was in the right place, and this person told us about Krishna consciousness, and that's all we needed. So how do we implement this change of strategy? Because it's not a blanket thing that you can say, okay, from now on, everybody's going to do this or that. From now on, everybody's going to wear pants, or everybody's going to wear, a Pocahontas outfit. It's not gonna change anything. It's not gonna be like everybody's gonna do it and they're gonna be successful. So is there a main element, a main way that we can all actually adapt to the times and become a little more sensitive to our audience and get the result?
Well, in terms of details, like you were saying, of course, we have to learn how to develop individually, how to come up with ideas, and of course, individually and in teams and groups as well. But I think the main thing that needs to be there is the understanding, the willingness to see the urgency of the situation, that we do need to adapt, that we do need to innovate. That is one thing that needs to be there first. And so a lot of devotees understand this, and then unfortunately there's a lot who don't really buy into it and are kind of hardline conservative. So it happens in every institution, and there's always going to be different opinions and different kinds of people and different kind of viewpoints. But as far as understanding, and hopefully more and more devotees are realizing that we need to innovate, that we need to change the packaging, keep the contents, but change the packaging in different ways according to time, place, and circumstance, who, where, when. So but I think it's also a mentality, because there's been this kind of mentality in ISKCON that we've been kind of brought up to think that, or to not think actually, like thinking is kind of like the fifth sinful activity, that is the problem. So the main thing is that devotees need to learn how to think and how to kind of realize that there's more that can be done, and it's not just all as some leaders are trying to portray, that everything is fine, everything's good, and we're all good. But actually to be able to think independently rather than just being, as we've been sort of brought up to be, yes men and yes women kind of thing, you just do what you're told, and you follow the process, and you don't go any further than that. We've been kind of blinkered into, and that's kind of very dangerous for the development of ISKCON at large, for the expansion of the mission. It's really become in-house, too much in-house, and too much kind of this obedience kind of ethic that's been taught, which doesn't really encourage very much independent thoughtfulness that Prabhupada actually wanted. He didn't want it to be like this. It's unfortunately the way that it's gone, and it needs to be changed. We need to kind of break the shackles and really use our God-given talents and intelligence to push forward Krishna consciousness. And all those who are able to, and all those, who have that ability, who have that kind of intelligence, they need to be encouraged to develop new initiatives. There shouldn't be like, if you want to develop a preaching program, you shouldn't have to get permission from the GBC. I mean, if the GBC give their blessings, then that's great. But if they don't, then that shouldn't really be hindering, because preaching initiatives are the stuff of life. That's transcendental, and that's not something that should be kind of hampered by institution or politics or things like that.
One thing we should wrap it up sometime in the near future. The talk that we are, at least I'm enjoying every word of it, at least your words. We have actually Devamrita Swami here in Gitanagar, and he's giving class at 8:30, so we need to finish before that time. I wanted to talk to you about, you mentioned book distribution, and this is a personal issue for me. I was a book distributor for 17 years, as I was a brahmachari during that time. And that's how I maintain the temples that I run on, or I lived under. And this is what the preaching was. But my concentration was always that people should read the books that I sell them. I never did a change up. I never tried to say one thing for another, for just to get the people to give me money. So by now we have distributed what, 600 million books, somewhere around there. How many were read? So we have to concentrate on the books that need to be read. If people read the books, by the law of average, we'll definitely have some people joining, because it's inevitable. I mean, Prabhupada's potency, the parampara, Krishna, the philosophy is there. There's nothing equivalent to it. So how do we get all those 600 million books read? How do we get people to read them?
Yeah, the question is, why are they not reading the books? And I think that, because now we're living in the age of mobile phones, TVs, movies, social media, there's not so much reading going on like before. But there are a lot of people that read, but I think that it needs to be perhaps something, in the beginning, they need something that's more simple. It's very simple, very easy to understand, and like modern language. And, in the same way that we need to innovate our preaching, we also need to innovate the books that we're presenting. So while Prabhupada's books are the most important ones, obviously they're the foundation, and there's nothing that can compare to Prabhupada's books. But for beginners, for newcomers, I think it's not always easy to dive into Prabhupada's books and to understand them and to relate to the language and everything, and to understand the concept and the way it's presented, because it's different from the modern way of writing and literature. So I think we need more kind of new books for beginners, and then once they've managed to get their head around those, then they can move on to reading Prabhupada's books. We need more introductory books, I think.
I think we need all sorts of books. I think there are a lot of genres that we haven't even touched, that people are used to reading, whatever it is, whether it is creative nonfiction, or it is fiction, or it is sci-fi, or it is fantasy, or it's drama, or plays, or anything. And that if devotees start writing books like that, people will actually be reading Krishna conscious things when they are not expecting to do so. Not just how can I simplify the fact that the sentence, "You're not this body." I mean, it's very difficult to simplify something like that, but you can actually write a story where, just like right now in the Bhagavatam class, we are studying the Puranjana story, an allegory, and where Narada Muni addresses King Prachina Barishat without addressing him. He says that once upon a time there was a king, O king, because he couldn't talk to the king straight. So we have people that they need this kind of indirect address, not that we simply simplify the philosophy even more, because the philosophy is pretty simple. We are not the body, we are part and parcel of the Supreme Lord, and as such we are servants and not masters. That, I don't know how you can simplify that more, but you can definitely write
I
it.
think you can simplify the language in which it's presented, and we can also kind of change the way it's presented in a more in a way that that's not too kind of dogmatic, but actually inviting people to think, like in a more sort of academic language that doesn't sort of push ideas, but invites people to consider this idea or that idea, like that. That also can help to get people in, because otherwise they can get put off if it's too dogmatic. Then they can get put off.
Okay. By the way, I did write on the chat the link to your book, which has sold quite a number of copies. I was surprised to hear, not because of the merit of the book, but because usually when devotees write books, the maximum circulation is about 1,000 to 2,000 books. It's just devotees buying devotees books. But it seems like, if you sold 20,000 of them and it was translated in other languages, you're reaching a good audience, which I commend you for. So I want to invite the devotees now, if they have any pressing questions. We don't have too much time, but we would like to hear from all of you, or any of you. Anyone? You can raise a virtual or a real hand.
Haribo Prabhu. Hare Krishna. I'm sorry I missed most of the class, but the point that you're making, that Mataji is making about making the books, simplifying the language of the books. I think that's a very pertinent point. And a great example is Bhaktitirtha Maharaj's series, Spiritual Warrior series. One of the best-selling books that he wrote was Turning Lust into Love. And that book was so popular because it really was relevant to people. People want loving relationships, how to get them. And that book addresses the whole aspect of, what love really is, and other things that deal with the psychic phenomena and enemies of the mind, and dealing with problems in the material world. So yeah, I think the more that we really understand what people are struggling with in the here and now, and write according to what they will find relevant, I think that's really what we need to do. And that takes intelligence. It also takes really understanding the current times that we're in, instead of living in the bubbles that devotees tend to live in, to really be understanding what's going on in the bigger picture.
Yes, yes. Yes, that's exactly true.
Just for the record, I didn't mean to decry the idea of simplifying the concept of Krishna consciousness. It's just that they can be packaged in different ways. They can be introduced in a this is a good example from lust to love. So let's hear if anyone else has questions or comments. Otherwise, I will encourage everyone to please unmute yourselves and offer your gratitude to Jagannathesvari Prabhu. And I didn't say Pravi, I said Prabhu, as Malati, Prabhupada's Malati, sent me a whole paper where Prabhupada addressed women as Prabhu, not as Dasi or Devi Dasi or Pravi. He actually called Malati Prabhu and Saraswati Prabhu, who was a toddler in her hands. So it is bona fide to call ladies Prabhu. So please, if you don't mind, to unmute yourself and thank her for speaking to us. This is a good time to do that.
Haribo Prabhu, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all for attending.
Jaya